She didn't know that one small act of kindness would change her life forever. A young black woman, down to her last $8, saw a rough-looking biker stranded by the roadside, a man the world told her to fear. Yet she stopped. She helped, and then disappeared back into her struggle, thinking nothing of it. But the next day, hundreds of roaring engines surrounded her tiny home. What they brought with them would silence an entire town. Was it gratitude? Or something far more powerful? This is the story of what happens when compassion meets prejudice, and the world watches in disbelief. Keisha was 22, working double shifts at a diner just outside Atlanta. Every day was the same. Wake up before dawn, lace up worn-out shoes, and serve people who rarely looked her in the eye. Life wasn't easy, but she faced it with quiet strength and a heart that refused to harden. She lived in a small apartment with peeling paint and dreams too big for her paycheck. Still, she found joy in little things, the laughter of neighborhood kids, the gospel songs humming from her radio, the way the morning light slipped through her window. That night, the air was heavy with rain and exhaustion. Keisha had just finished her shift, her last tip barely enough for groceries. As she walked home, her old car coughed and died on the side of the road. That's when she saw him, a massive figure in leather, tattoos glinting under the streetlight, standing beside a roaring motorcycle that refused to start. Most people would have kept walking, but Keisha stopped. Something in her heart whispered that this moment mattered, though she couldn't say why. She clutched her last $8, her grocery money, and stepped toward him. What she didn't know was that this small act of kindness, born from nothing but faith in good, would ripple far beyond that dark roadside. It would challenge the quiet prejudice of an entire town and ignite a story no one would forget. The rain started to pour harder as Keisha stood beside the biker's broken-down Harley. The man's leather jacket was soaked, his beard dripping with water. His name patch read Ryder, and on his back was something that made her hesitate, the emblem of the Hells Angels. Every warning she'd ever heard echoed in her mind. Stay away from them. They're trouble. They don't help people like us. But his face told a different story. Tired, desperate, human. Without thinking twice, she handed him her umbrella and those 8 crumpled dollars, her grocery money, so he could call for help or buy gas. Ryder stared at her, stunned. He thanked her quietly, his voice rough like gravel. Keisha smiled, waved it off, and walked into the rain, soaked but strangely lighthearted. She didn't know she'd just lit a fuse that would expose the deep cracks in her town's soul. By morning, whispers began. Someone had seen her helping a biker, a white biker. In a place where lines were still drawn, where kindness was often filtered through color, her neighbors didn't see compassion. They saw betrayal. At the diner, her co-worker leaned in and muttered, "You really gave him money? You don't know who those people are." Another customer made a cruel joke about buying favor with the devil. Keisha tried to ignore it, but the laughter that followed burned deeper than the rain ever could. Days passed, but the tension didn't fade. It grew. A photo of her on the roadside appeared on social media, snapped by someone passing by. The caption read, "Guess who's getting friendly with the angels now?" Comments poured in. Some defended her, but others spat venom, accusing her of trying to prove something, of forgetting her place. The diner's manager called her in, nervous. "Maybe take a few days off until things cool down," he said. But they never did. When she got home, someone had spray-painted her front door. Traitor. That night, Keisha sat alone, staring at the faded paint and the hateful word dripping down like blood. She wanted to cry, but more than that, she wanted to understand. How could an act of kindness cause this much hate? And then, just as dawn broke, she heard it. A low, growing rumble in the distance. Engines, dozens, no, hundreds of them. The sound grew louder, shaking the windows, echoing down her quiet street. Keisha's heart pounded. She ran to the window and froze. Her small front yard was filled with motorcycles. Row after row of leather-clad riders, every one of them wearing the same Hells Angels emblem. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, whispering, were they here to threaten her or protect her? The leader stepped forward, Ryder, the same man she'd helped days ago. But behind him, something unexpected gleamed in the morning light. What they had brought would silence every voice that had doubted her humanity. And at that moment, the entire town held its breath. For a few tense seconds, no one moved. The engines kept idling, their deep rumble vibrating through the ground like a warning. Keisha's heart raced. Her neighbors had gathered at their fences, whispering, fear, suspicion, and judgment thick in the air. Then Ryder stepped forward, rain dripping from his helmet as he nodded toward the truck behind him. The back door swung open. Inside wasn't intimidation, it was hope. A brand new car gleaming beneath a tarp, surrounded by boxes of groceries, furniture, and clothes. A gift from the Hells Angels. Ryder's voice cut through the air. She gave me her last $8 when nobody else would stop. This town needs to remember what humanity looks like. But not everyone was ready to listen. A man across the street shouted, "We don't need your charity here!" Another yelled slurs, their anger boiling over. For years, this town had been divided by invisible lines, and now those lines were being erased right in front of them. Keisha's hands trembled as she looked around. Some people glared. Others lowered their eyes in shame. A few even began to cry. For the first time, they saw her, not as a label, not as a stereotype, but as a person who had chosen love over fear. Police sirens wailed in the distance, but no one moved. The bikers stood their ground, engines roaring louder, drowning out hate itself. Keisha's eyes met Ryder's, two people from different worlds, united by something stronger than prejudice. In that storm-soaked moment, surrounded by noise and judgment, she realized something life-changing. Compassion was rebellion, and as thunder cracked above them, the truth became undeniable. Sometimes it takes an unexpected alliance to break a town's silence. What happened next would turn a single act of kindness into a movement no one saw coming. When the engines finally faded into the distance, the town was left in silence, a silence that felt heavier than thunder. Keisha stood on her porch, tears mixing with the rain, staring at the car the bikers had left behind. It wasn't just a gift. It was a statement. A message carved into the conscience of a place that had forgotten what humanity looked like. The local paper ran the story the next day. Black woman's kindness moves Hell's Angels to act. Some called it unbelievable. Others called it impossible. But for the people who had mocked her, who had laughed behind closed doors, the picture of Keisha standing beside those bikers told a truth they could no longer deny. Kindness had no color, and prejudice had no defense. Keisha didn't become famous. She didn't seek attention. She just kept living her life, serving coffee at the same diner, greeting the same people who once whispered behind her back. But something had changed. The stares were softer now, the jokes quieter, and every so often a stranger would stop her, not to question her choices, but to thank her for reminding them of what courage looks like. In the end, her story wasn't about bikers or money. It was about breaking the invisible walls we build between us. About how compassion, even from the most unexpected hearts, can shake the foundations of hate. Because the truth is, racism doesn't end when the shouting stops. It ends when someone chooses to care, even when it costs them everything. Keisha gave her last $8 and got a world to look in the mirror. And maybe that's the question we should all be asking ourselves. If kindness could change her town, what could it do for ours?